decido las ideas de ti. Van a decir cosas muy feas, que no eres buena, que si tal cosa, que cuando callas te ves mucho más hermosa. Mujer, espiga abierta entre pañales, cadena de eslabones ancestrales, ovario fuerte, di lo que vales. La vida empieza donde todos son iguales. Ángela James o antes Manuela, mañana es tarde y el tiempo apremia.
While she was living, she was kind of often considered like the wife of Diego, who painted, and had, followed him around as he was commissioned to do work in America. And while she did do her own exhibits and whatnot, later, after she died, she really became, a real symbolic feminist left-wing symbol. The relationship, again, like I said, is a very interesting one. They both were quite short-tempered individuals, and they had multiple affairs. I just couldn't, reading through them, you couldn't keep track of all the different. And she was openly bisexual. Diego didn't seem to have much issues with her having affairs with women, but he was often quite jealous of affairs that she had with men. And the real sort of turning point in terms of their relationship is when Diego had an affair with her sister, Christina. I think it was lasted over a year. But even then, they divorced, and a year later, remarried again. Of course, as you know, she has very left roots, was very involved politically. Both her and Diego were active communists. Trotsky even came to seek political asylum and stayed with Frida and Diego, where allegedly, there was another affair between the two of them. And it's hard to say, she doesn't always describe her work as being political statements, especially in the beginning. It was really like a depiction of self, and truth. But because because it was so honest that people could see the political undertones in it or relate to it politically. I guess also we have to acknowledge the obvious Mexican culture and influence, especially in the earlier years, where you see the use of bright colors, dramatic symbolism. There's a lot of Jewish and Christian undertones in a lot of her work. She uses images of monkeys and hummingbirds. Sort of moving on to more of a feminist look at it. Kahlo painted a feminine reality which makes visible so much that remained hidden about women's lives. She was dealing with things that weren't ever really, discussed: conception, pregnancy, abortion, sexual identity, politics. Women doing this was just not really seen, and her art was shocking. And even if you look at this one here, My Birth, that really puts, women at the center of art. And it's not, Mary holding baby Jesus with a bunch of men standing around her. It is a very graphic, real depiction with women at the center of reality.
Andre Breton, a European artist, described Frida Kahlo's work as surrealist, but Frida Kahlo denied ever even hearing of the surrealist movement which was taking place in Europe. She said that surrealism depicted dreams while her work depicted reality. It was all about consciousness and about her consciousness as a woman. Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera lived in the US between 1930 and 1934. They arrived in America during the Great Depression, and she was disgusted at the huge gulf between the rich and the poor, and the fact that many people in Northern America seemed completely not bothered by that. Furthermore, being a child of the revolution, she couldn't understand how people could be so unconcerned about politics in general and not care about justice or equality. So while in Detroit, Frida Kahlo became pregnant in 1932, and as I said, she longed for a child. She desperately wanted to have her own children, and she was very much torn between the option of carrying through a dangerous pregnancy or opting for the more practical choice of having an abortion. And she actually tried to have an abortion, which failed, but later she miscarried 4 months into the pregnancy. She was brought to Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit when she had this miscarriage, and then which led on to the production of this painting, which depicts her sorrow at her miscarriage. She depicts herself with a pregnant belly lying in her own blood with tears on her face. Her bed exists in a vacuum beyond which the hated Detroit landscape can be seen. The surroundings are cold and oppressive. The figure is bound by red ribbons that mimic umbilical cords to overtly sexual symbols. You can see the symbol of the fetus above the bed. There's an orchid on the bottom there that is made to look like a woman's uterus, and then there's various mechanical and biological representations of her abdomen which could not sustain the pregnancy that she so badly wanted. The body is twisted and the bed is tipped up, which adds to the feeling of helplessness and disconnection. Discomfort is shown in the way the body is painted. The upper half of her body is facing the viewer while the bottom half is twisted away. I actually had a tough time researching this piece and trying to bring it into a political context, because historians and art critics a lot of them have ignored the political context of Frida Kahlo's work. I think the reason for this, there's two reasons for this. It boils down to patriarchy, in that women have been ignored throughout history as being political people at all. And secondly, I think the capitalist system, the capitalist world often doesn't acknowledge socialist or communist ideas. In this work as well, I think it's important to mention the landscape behind her, the depiction of Detroit. Often historians just say, well, she depicted Detroit because she hated it, and end of story. But I think that she intentionally juxtaposes her sorrow and misery against the Detroit landscape, which represents the capitalist system, the way that the capitalist system brings misery to people's lives, and it reflects the misery that she felt because of personal health reasons.
Just on the maternity level, the maternal level, where the struggles, it must have been so difficult for her not to be able to conceive, and that is a real issue for so many women that she depicts so well there. Just also, at the mention of Detroit and her hatred of the system as well is very profound in all the paintings, but she writes about it a lot, and I have a quotation from some of her love letters as well, where she quotes, "I dislike high society, the rage against the fat cats, that she sees the misery amongst all of the cities," which is permeates to all of her paintings as well. But just her honesty, I think, and her I have two more thoughts here, but I've lost them again. But mainly, I'm thinking I love her because she expresses so many of the female struggles that aren't at all expressed, I think, enough nationally. So that's what the main point I want to say.
My favourite painting is a thousand. It's translated roughly into 1,000 little nips, and that's the one of the man standing over the bed with the woman bleeding. And I love that because going back to now, over this weekend, we're talking about gender-based violence, intimate partner violence. She painted it after a story in the newspaper in Mexico where a man butchered his wife. I think what's clear is her sexuality, fertility, like liberating, and like that's really graphic in some of the pictures, but also there's different kind of still life pictures of Frida that aren't so graphic, that are actually really gorgeous as well, and don't get pushed enough. There's ones like of, I think, like the lotus flower, which represents the uterus, but there's more of them like that, like with fruits and flowers that are really lovely as well. I think some of, like all of Frida's paintings have like political undertones, whether that just be like about like the native Mexicans and how they've been treated, but also there is ones that are more definitely like openly political, and I don't think it's there, but like one of my favourite paintings that she's done is Marxism Will Heal the World.
Mujer, si te han crecido las ideas, de ti van a decir cositas muy feas. Cuando no quieras ser incubadora, dirán, no sirven estas mujeres de ahora. Mujer, semilla, fruto, flor, camino. Pensar es altamente femenino. Hay en tu pecho dos manantiales, fusiles blancos y no anuncios comerciales.